The Tribunal's judgment. The Galactic Tribunal loomed before Zara Chen, its massive crystalline structure seeming to pierce the very fabric of space. Zara stood tall, her dark eyes fixed on the 7 judges seated high above her. Each was a member of a different alien species, their forms as varied as the stars themselves. The central judge, a towering being with iridescent scales and multiple arms, spoke in a voice that reverberated through the chamber. Zara Chen of Earth, you stand accused of trespassing in the restricted space of the Axoni Collective. How do you plead? Zara's voice rang clear and strong. Not guilty, Your Honors. I was on a sanctioned exploration mission. Our nav systems malfunctioned, sending us off course. A ripple of murmurs swept through the observing crowd. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic stage, and many viewed them with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. The judge to the right, a being composed entirely of swirling gases, spoke next. Your ship's black box data contradicts your claim. It shows a deliberate course change into Axoni space. Zara's heart raced, but she kept her composure. With all due respect, Your Honor, that data must be corrupted. We had no reason to enter restricted space knowingly. The judges conferred among themselves, their alien features impossible for Zara to read. After what felt like an eternity, the central judge spoke again. Zara Chen, we find your explanation lacking. The evidence against you is substantial. This tribunal finds you guilty of trespassing and espionage. Zara's stomach dropped, but she refused to show fear. She knew the Galactic Tribunal's punishments could be severe, especially for a species still proving its worth in the cosmic community. The judge continued, for your crimes, and as a message to your species about the consequences of defying galactic law, we sentence you to exile. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. Exile was rare, reserved for the most serious offenses. Your exile will be served on Erebus. This time, even Zara couldn't suppress her shock. Erebus was infamous throughout the galaxy, a deathworld so hostile that no known sentient species had ever survived there for more than a few days. The judge's voice grew colder. Perhaps this will teach humanity the folly of venturing where they do not belong. As the sentence was pronounced, Zara's mind raced. She knew of Erebus from her training, a planet with gravity 1.5 times that of Earth, atmosphere thick with toxic gases, and wildlife evolved to kill in the most efficient ways imaginable. The surface temperature fluctuated wildly, from scorching heat to freezing cold within hours. But as the reality of her sentence sank in, something else stirred within Zara. It wasn't fear, but a fierce determination. She was a trained explorer, versed in survival techniques for hostile environments. If any human could survive Erebus, it would be her. The judges, expecting to see terror on her face, were visibly taken aback by the steel in her eyes. Do you understand your sentence? The central judge asked, a note of uncertainty creeping into its voice. Zara nodded firmly. I do, Your Honor. When do I leave? Her calm acceptance seemed to unsettle the tribunal even more. The gaseous judge swirled more rapidly, a sign of agitation. You will be transported immediately. Your survival gear will be limited to standard exile provisions. As the guards moved to escort her away, Zara took one last look at the tribunal. She saw not just aliens passing judgment, but a galaxy that underestimated humanity. In that moment, she made a silent vow. She would survive, not just for herself, but to show the universe what humans were truly capable of. The journey to Erebus was a blur of cramped spaces and artificial sleep. Zara used the time to mentally prepare, recalling every bit of training and knowledge that might help her survive. As the transport ship entered Erebus's atmosphere, violent turbulence shook the vessel. Through a small viewport, Zara caught her first glimpse of the planet that was meant to be her tomb. Angry red clouds swirled over a landscape of jagged mountains and vast, desolate plains. Lightning crackled constantly, illuminating the perpetual twilight caused by the thick atmosphere. The ship's computer spoke in a monotone. Prepare for landing. Atmosphere is toxic. Gravity is 1.5 g. Current surface temperature is 40 degrees Celsius. Survival gear will be dispensed upon landing. Zara took a deep breath, steeling herself. As the ship touched down with a bone-jarring thud, a panel opened, revealing a sealed suit and a small pack of basic supplies. The computer spoke again. "Exiled prisoner, you may now disembark. May whatever gods you believe in have mercy on your soul." Zara suited up quickly, her movements efficient despite the increased gravity already weighing on her. As the ship's door opened, a blast of hot, acrid air rushed in. Zara stepped out onto the surface of Erebus, her boots sinking slightly into the loose, blackened soil. The ship wasted no time in taking off, leaving her alone on the hostile world. Zara watched it disappear into the roiling clouds, then turned to face the desolate landscape before her. Most beings would have been overwhelmed by despair at this point, but Zara felt a surge of adrenaline, her explorer's instincts kicking in. This was a challenge unlike any humanity had faced before, and she was determined to rise to it. She activated her suit's sensors, immediately gathering data about her surroundings. The air was a toxic mixture of sulfur compounds and heavy metals. The ground beneath her feet was unstable, suggesting seismic activity. In the distance, she could hear sounds that sent chills down her spine. The calls of predators evolved in this nightmarish environment. Zara knew her first priority was to find shelter. The temperature swings on Erebus were legendary, and she needed protection from both the heat and the inevitable cold that would follow. Her eyes scanned the horizon, looking for any geological formation that might offer some respite. About a kilometer away, she spotted a series of rock formations that looked promising. Ignoring the burning in her muscles from the increased gravity, Zara began to move towards them. As she walked, her mind was already racing with plans. She would need to find a water source, test for any potentially edible vegetation, and establish some kind of defensive perimeter. The survival gear she'd been given was minimal: a multi-tool, a few nutrient packs, and a basic medkit. Everything else, she would have to scavenge or create herself. Halfway to the rocks, Zara's suit sensors blared a warning. A massive heat signature was approaching rapidly from her left. She turned to see a creature that defied description. A nightmarish fusion of reptile and insect, its armored hide glistening with toxic secretions. Zara's heart pounded, but her training kicked in. She analyzed her surroundings quickly, noting a depression in the ground nearby. As the creature charged, she dove into the hollow, using the uneven terrain to her advantage. The beast, clearly not used to prey that fought back, seemed confused by her disappearance. It circled the area, its multiple eyes scanning for movement. Zara lay still, controlling her breathing, waiting for her moment. When the creature turned away, she sprang into action. Using a sharp piece of rock, she struck at a joint in its armor that her suit's sensors had identified as a weak point. The beast roared in pain and fury, but Zara was already moving, sprinting towards the rock formation with every ounce of strength she could muster. She reached the rocks just as the creature recovered, diving into a narrow crevice that the massive beast couldn't follow her into. As she caught her breath, listening to the frustrated roars outside, a grim smile crossed Zora's face. This was Erebus, a world designed to kill. But Zora was human, and humans had a long history of surviving in places they were never meant to thrive. The Galactic Tribunal had sentenced her to death, but they had underestimated the species they were dealing with. As the first day on Erebus drew to a close, Zara began to fortify her shelter, her mind already working on plans for the days ahead. She was more than just an explorer now. She was humanity's representative on this Deathworld, and she was determined to show the galaxy just what that meant. The Tribunal had meant to break her. Instead, they had given her the chance to make history, and Zara Chen, exile and explorer, was ready for the challenge. Forged in fire. The relentless red sun of Erebus never truly set, casting an eternal twilight across the hostile landscape. Zara Chen, still tucked away in her makeshift shelter among the jagged rocks, watched as the temperature display on her suit plummeted. The brutal heat of the day was giving way to the bone-chilling cold of night, a transformation as swift as it was merciless. Zara's breath fogged the inside of her helmet as she took stock of her situation. The crevice she'd found was defensible, but it offered little protection from the elements. She needed to adapt quickly if she was going to survive. First things first, she muttered to herself, her voice a comfort in the alien silence. Insulation and water. With methodical precision, Zara began to gather what she could from her immediate surroundings. The rock itself, she discovered, had insulating properties. Using her multi-tool, she chipped away at softer sections, creating a fine, sand-like substance. Mixing this with the fibrous remains of a dead, plant-like organism she'd found nearby, Zara created a crude but effective insulation. As she worked, her mind wandered to Earth, to the history of human exploration and survival. She thought of the early polar expeditions, of desert nomads, of astronauts venturing into the unforgiving vacuum of space. Humans had always pushed boundaries, always found a way to survive. Erebus was just another frontier. The temperature continued to drop, and Zara's suit warned of approaching crystallization in the atmosphere. She worked faster, lining her shelter with her makeshift insulation. Just as she finished, the first ice crystals began to form on the exposed surfaces outside. Zara huddled in her newly insulated nook, watching in awe as the world outside transformed. The toxic atmosphere, mixed with rapidly dropping temperatures, created a landscape of deadly beauty. Crystalline structures formed and shattered in moments, their tinkling sounds a deceptively gentle backdrop to the lethal cold. As the long night wore on, Zara's thoughts turned to water. Her suit's recycling systems would keep her alive for a while, but she needed to find a sustainable source. She reviewed the geological data her suit had collected. There were indications of subterranean water sources, likely heated by the planet's intense geological activity. When the first signs of warming appeared, Zara emerged from her shelter, stiff but alive. The transition back to heat was almost as brutal as the onset of cold had been. She watched in fascination as the crystalline structures melted and sublimated, releasing their toxic components back into the atmosphere. Zara set out, her muscles straining against Erebus's punishing gravity. Her suit's sensors guided her towards a promising heat signature several kilometers away. The journey was grueling. Twice she had to take cover from roaming predators, their forms as nightmarish as the one she'd encountered on her first day. As she approached the heat signature, the ground became increasingly unstable. Steam vented from cracks in the earth, carrying with it a cocktail of chemicals that set off multiple warnings on her suit's display. A geothermal vent, Zara realized aloud. And where there's geothermal activity. She scanned the area carefully, looking for signs of liquid water. There, in a depression near one of the larger vents, she saw it, a pool of bubbling liquid. Her suit's analysis confirmed it was water, albeit laden with minerals and sulfur compounds. Zara approached cautiously, mindful of the unstable ground. She collected a sample, her suit immediately beginning to analyze its composition. The water was far from pure, but with proper filtration, it could be made safe to drink. As she stood there, formulating plans for water collection and purification, the ground beneath her feet suddenly shifted. Zara lost her balance, tumbling down the slope towards the bubbling pool. She caught herself just at the edge, her suit's material sizzling where droplets of the hot, mineral-rich water had splashed. Heart pounding, Zara pulled herself away from the pool's edge. As she did, she noticed something strange. Where the water had splashed on a nearby rock, a thin layer of mineral deposits had quickly formed. An idea began to take shape in her mind. If I could control that process, she mused, I could create tools, maybe even structures. The discovery energized her. Water wasn't just survival now. It was an opportunity to reshape her environment. Zara spent the rest of the day observing the geothermal area, taking samples and experimenting with the mineral-rich water. As she worked, a distant part of her mind reflected on the irony of her situation. The Galactic Tribunal had sent her here to die, but in doing so, they had given her the opportunity to truly live, to push the boundaries of human ingenuity and adaptability. By the time the temperature began to drop again, signaling the approach of another brutal night, Zara had already made significant progress. She had rigged a basic filtration system using layers of the fibrous plant matter and the finer rock particles. It wasn't perfect, but it made the water safe enough to supplement her suit's dwindling supplies. More exciting were her experiments with the mineral deposits. By carefully controlling the cooling process of the mineral-rich water, she had managed to create crude but effective tools. A sharp edge here, a sturdy handle there. It was primitive technology, but it was a start. As Zara made her way back to her shelter, new tools in hand, she felt a surge of determination. Erebus was harsh, unforgiving, and lethal, but it was also a blank slate. Every challenge was an opportunity to innovate, every obstacle a chance to showcase human resourcefulness. She thought of the Tribunal, of their dismissive attitude towards humanity. They had seen humans as primitive, as easy to discard. They couldn't have been more wrong. Settling into her shelter as the cold set in, Zara allowed herself a small smile. "You wanted to break me," she said to the uncaring skies of Erebus. "Instead, you've made me stronger." As crystal formations once again began to form outside her shelter, Zara Chen, exile and explorer, began to plan. She had survived the immediate threat of Erebus, but survival wasn't enough. She was going to thrive here, and in doing so, she would show the galaxy the true strength of humanity. The night deepened, but Zara's mind was alight with possibilities. Erebus had not seen the last of her, not by a long shot. The real challenge was just beginning. Echoes in the abyss. Weeks had passed since Zara's arrival on Erebus, each day a brutal test of her will and ingenuity. Her shelter, once a mere crevice in the rocks, had evolved into a defendable haven. Using the mineral-rich water from the geothermal vents, she had created structures that could withstand both the scorching heat and the bone-chilling cold. Zara's days fell into a rhythm dictated by Erebus itself. She foraged during the heat, taking shelter as temperatures plummeted, and worked on her projects during the long crystalline nights. Her suit, designed for short-term survival, was showing signs of wear. She had begun to supplement it with layers of treated fibers from the hardy vegetation she discovered, creating a symbiosis of human technology and Arabian materials. On this particular day, Zara ventured further from her base than ever before. Her improved water filtration system had given her a surplus, allowing for longer expeditions. As she crested a ridge of razor-sharp rocks, the landscape before her took her breath away. The vast canyon stretched out, its depths lost in swirling toxic mists. But it wasn't the canyon itself that caught Zara's attention. There, carved into the far wall, was an unmistakable sign of intelligence, a massive doorway, its edges too precise to be natural. "Impossible," Zara whispered, her mind reeling. Erebus was supposed to be uninhabited, too hostile for any civilization to take root. Yet there it was, clear evidence that someone, or something, had been here before. As she stood there, grappling with the implications of her discovery, a sound cut through the constant wind. A scream, unmistakably sentient, coming from somewhere below. Without hesitation, Zara began to make her way down the treacherous canyon wall. The descent was harrowing, the toxic mists below promising a quick death if she fell. But the screams continued, driving her onward. Near the bottom of the canyon, Zara found the source. A being, vaguely humanoid but clearly alien, was trapped beneath a fallen rock formation. Its exosuit, similar in design to Zara's but of clearly different origin, was breached in several places. Zara approached cautiously. "Hey there," she called out, her suit's speakers projecting her voice. "I'm here to help. Can you understand me?" The alien's head snapped towards her, multiple eyes widening in what Zara interpreted as surprise. It spoke, the sounds unintelligible, but clearly a language. Okay, no common language. That's fine. We'll figure it out, Zara muttered to herself. She pointed to the rocks pinning the alien down, then to herself, mimicking a lifting motion. The alien seemed to understand, nodding vigorously. Zara set to work, using her makeshift tools and every ounce of strength she could muster in Erebus's crushing gravity. It was slow, grueling work, but finally she managed to create enough space for the alien to wiggle free. As soon as it was clear, the alien collapsed, its suit hissing alarmingly. Acting on instinct, Zara scooped up the being, surprisingly light despite its size, and began the arduous climb back to the surface. Every step was agony, her muscles screaming under the dual burden of Erebus's gravity and her unexpected passenger. By the time they reached the surface, Zara was on the verge of collapse herself. But there was no time to rest. The alien's suit was failing rapidly, toxic Arabian air seeping in through the breaches. In a desperate gamble, Zara led them to her shelter. The journey was a blur of pain and determination, the alien's labored breathing a constant reminder of the stakes. Inside her shelter, Zara worked frantically. She had salvaged sealant materials from crashed exile pods she'd found during her explorations. Now she used these to patch the alien's suit as best she could. It was far from perfect, but it stemmed the flow of toxic air. As the immediate crisis passed, Zara finally had a moment to truly look at her new companion. The alien was unlike any species she had encountered in her time as an explorer. Its form seemed to shift slightly, as if struggling to maintain cohesion in Erebus's atmosphere. Multiple limbs ended in delicate, multi-jointed appendages, and a cluster of eyes blinked at her from what she assumed was its face. The alien spoke again, a series of clicks and whistles. Then, to Zora's astonishment, it reached out and tapped her suit's communication panel. A moment later, her suit's speakers crackled to life. Gratitude, life debt, came a halting, synthesized voice. You, not Tribunal. Zara's mind raced. Her suit must have used the alien's speech patterns to cobble together a rough translation. No, not Tribunal, she replied carefully. I'm Zora, human, exiled here. The alien's form rippled, a movement Zara interpreted as agitation. Exiled. Us too. Many. Cycles ago. Zara's jaw dropped. Wait, there are more of you. How long have you been here? Generations, came the reply. Hidden. Surviving. You? First new one. Long time. The implications hit Zara like a physical blow. There was a whole society of exiles here on Erebus, survivors of the Tribunal's cruel judgments. They had not just survived, but had built a life here, hidden from the eyes of the galaxy. The door in the canyon, Zara said, realization dawning. That's yours. The alien's eyes blinked in rapid succession. Home, it confirmed. Safe, from Erebus. You? Come. Zara hesitated for just a moment. Everything she knew told her to be cautious, to not trust too easily. But something deeper, a human instinct for connection, for community, pushed her forward. Yes, she said firmly. I'll come. As she helped the alien to its feet, preparing for the journey to this hidden sanctuary, Zara felt a profound shift in her understanding of her situation. She had come to Erebus alone, a solitary human against a hostile world. Now she was about to step into a community born of shared adversity, a melting pot of species and cultures united by their will to survive. The Galactic Tribunal had meant Erebus to be a death sentence. Instead, it had become the crucible for something entirely new. As Zara and her new companion set out across the harsh landscape, she couldn't help but smile. The Tribunal had underestimated not just humanity, but the indomitable spirit of life itself. Erebus, it seemed, had many more secrets to reveal. And Zara Chen, human explorer and exile, was ready to uncover them all. The Underground Revolution. Zara followed her alien rescuee, whom she had come to know as San, through a series of winding tunnels carved deep into the canyon wall. The air grew less toxic as they descended, and soon they emerged into a vast cavern that took Zora's breath away. The underground city of the exiles was a marvel of adaptation and ingenuity. Bioluminescent fungi lined the walls, casting a soft, otherworldly glow over everything. Structures of various designs and materials dotted the cavern floor, each clearly adapted to suit the needs of different alien physiologies. In the center, a massive geothermal vent provided energy and heat, its output carefully controlled by technology that seemed cobbled together from a dozen different worlds. As they entered, all activity ceased. Hundreds of eyes, of every conceivable shape and color, turned to stare at Zora. She was the first newcomer they had seen in generations. Talon spoke, its clicks and whistles echoing through the cavern. Zora's suit translated haltingly. New exile. Save me, human. A ripple of excitement passed through the crowd. An elder of San's species approached, its form shimmering with what Zara interpreted as intense emotion. Welcome, human. The elder's words came through Zora's translator. I am Zhou, leader of the Forgotten. You have saved one of our own. We are in your debt. Zara removed her helmet, trusting the air quality readings on her suit. I'm Zora Chin, she said, her voice filled with wonder. I had no idea anyone could survive here long term. This is incredible. Zhou's form rippled in what Zora was beginning to recognize as their version of a smile. Necessity breeds innovation. Zora Chin. Come, let us share stories. Over the next few days, Zora learned the history of the Forgotten. They were the descendants of exiles sent to Erebus over centuries, each believing they were alone until chance encounters brought them together. United by their shared fate, they had pooled their knowledge and resources, creating this hidden sanctuary. But their situation was far from ideal. Resources were scarce, and the harsh conditions of Erebus took a constant toll. Many of their technologies were failing, and without new materials and knowledge, their future was uncertain. Zara shared her own story, her skills as an explorer, and her experiences surviving on the surface. The Forgotten were fascinated by her tales of recent galactic events, having been cut off from the outside world for so long. As the days passed, Zara found herself fully integrated into the community. Her human adaptability and problem-solving skills proved invaluable. She helped improve their water filtration systems using techniques she had developed on the surface, and her knowledge of recent technology helped them repair and upgrade some of their failing systems. But a growing restlessness nagged at Zara. As amazing as the Forgotten's survival was, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were living on borrowed time. Erebus was wearing them down, slowly but surely. During a community gathering, Zara finally voiced her thoughts. We need to leave Erebus, she said, her words causing a stir among the assembled exiles. Together, we have the knowledge and skills to build a ship. We could escape. The idea was met with a mix of hope and skepticism. Zhou spoke up, its form flickering with concern. The surface is too dangerous for prolonged exposure. And even if we could build a ship, where would we go? The galaxy has forgotten us. Zara stood tall, her eyes blazing with determination. The galaxy might have forgotten you, but I haven't. There are uninhabited worlds where we could make a new start. And as for the surface, she grinned. Well, that's where I come in. Over the next weeks, Zara led expeditions to the surface, teaching the Forgotten how to survive in the harsh conditions they had hidden from for so long. They scavenged materials from old exile pods and the ruins of failed attempts at colonization. The work was dangerous. They lost 2 of their own to Erebus' hostile wildlife and treacherous terrain. But with each successful mission, hope grew stronger. In the caverns, work began on the ship. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. A patchwork of technologies from a dozen worlds, held together by human ingenuity and alien perseverance. Zara's knowledge of recent spacecraft design proved crucial, filling in gaps in the Forgotten's outdated information. Months passed, and the ship slowly took shape. They named it Phoenix, after the mythical earth bird that rises from its own ashes. As it neared completion, excitement and trepidation filled the caverns in equal measure. But their work hadn't gone unnoticed. One day, as Zara led a final scavenging mission on the surface, she spotted something that made her blood run cold: a Tribunal observation drone, previously hidden by Erebus's electromagnetic interference, now active and scanning. Zara raced back to the caverns, sounding the alarm. "The Tribunal knows something's happening," she announced to the gathered Forgotten. "We need to launch now, ready or not." Panic threatened to overtake the community, but Zara's calm leadership rallied them. "This is what we've been working for," she said, her voice carrying through the cavern. "Erebus was meant to be our end, but we've turned it into our beginning. The Tribunal thought they could break us, but they only made us stronger. Together, we're going to show the galaxy what true resilience looks like." Her words ignited a fire in the Forgotten. With renewed purpose, they made final preparations for launch. The Phoenix, their impossible ship born of desperation and hope, stood ready. As Tribunal ships appeared in the sky, no doubt coming to investigate the anomalous activity, Zara took her place at the Phoenix's helm. Around her, the Forgotten manned their stations, each vital role filled by the being best suited for it. Zara's hands flew over the controls, systems she had helped design responding to her touch. The Phoenix shuddered, then began to rise. "Erebus tried to claim us," Zara said, her voice steady as the ship broke through the toxic atmosphere. "The Tribunal tried to forget us. But we're still here. We're still fighting." The Phoenix burst into open space, its strange form a testament to the indomitable will of those the galaxy had cast aside. As Tribunal ships scrambled to intercept, Zara felt a fierce joy. Their journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But they had done the impossible. They had escaped the inescapable world. And in doing so, they had proven that no force in the galaxy could truly extinguish the flame of hope and the power of unity. As the Phoenix leaped into faster-than-light travel, leaving Erebus and the Tribunal far behind, Zara Chen, once exiled human and now leader of the most unlikely crew in the galaxy, allowed herself a smile. The stars stretched before them, full of possibility. The Forgotten were forgotten no longer. And the galaxy would never be the same. Ripples across the stars. The Phoenix streaked through space, its unconventional design a testament to the ingenuity of its creators. Inside, Zara Chen stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the swirling patterns of faster-than-light travel. Around her, the Forgotten worked in perfect harmony, each member contributing their unique skills to keep their impossible ship running. Weeks had passed since their dramatic escape from Erebus. They had managed to evade Tribunal pursuit, thanks in no small part to the Phoenix's hybrid systems that defied standard detection methods. Now, they were approaching their destination, a remote, habitable world far from the reach of galactic authorities. As they dropped out of FTL, a blue-green planet filled their view screen. Zara heard gasps of wonder from around the bridge. For many of the Forgotten, this was the first time they had seen a world other than Erebus in generations. "Welcome to New Horizon," Zara announced, the name they had chosen together for their new home. The landing was smooth, a testament to the skills they had honed on the treacherous surface of Erebus. As the airlock cycled open, Zara was the first to step out onto the fertile soil of New Horizon. The air was sweet, the gravity comfortable, and two suns shone warmly in a sky of pale lavender. Tears streamed down Zora's face as she turned to her companions. "We made it," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "We're free." The next few months were a flurry of activity as the Forgotten established their new colony. They built homes, planted crops, and began to explore their new world. Zara found herself in a leadership role, her experiences both as an explorer and as the bridge between the Forgotten and the modern galaxy proving invaluable. But even as they built their new lives, Zara knew their story wasn't over. The Tribunal was still out there, and the injustice that had brought them all to Erebus remained unchallenged. It was Tan who approached her one evening, as she stood watching the twin suns set. "Zara," it said, its translator now much more fluent after months of use, "we've been talking. All of us. We can't just hide here forever." Zara nodded, having had the same thoughts herself. "You're right. The galaxy needs to know the truth. About Erebus, about the Tribunal's cruelty, about all of you." And so a plan was formed. Using components salvaged from the Phoenix, they built a powerful transmitter. Zara composed a message, a declaration to the galaxy. In it, she told their story, of survival against impossible odds, of a community forged in the fires of adversity, of the strength found in diversity. As the message was broadcast across all known frequencies, Zara and the Forgotten waited. Days passed with no response, then weeks, and then, finally, their transmitter crackled to life. It started small at first, curious explorers, independent traders, journalists seeking the truth. They came to New Horizon, drawn by the incredible tale of the Erebus survivors. Each visitor left changed, carrying the story of the Forgotten back to the wider galaxy. As word spread, public opinion began to shift. Questions were raised about the ethics of the Tribunal's exile policy. Demands were made for investigations into Erebus and other so-called deathworlds. The Tribunal, predictably, tried to dismiss the claims, but the evidence was undeniable. The very existence of the Forgotten, their incredible ship, and the thriving colony on New Horizon stood as irrefutable proof of their story. Zara found herself at the center of a galactic controversy. She testified before interstellar committees, her words broadcast to trillions across countless worlds. She spoke of the horrors of Erebus, of the strength and resilience of the Forgotten, and of the fundamental injustice of a system that discarded lives so callously. The movement grew, gaining momentum with each passing day. Other exiles, inspired by the story of the Forgotten, began to speak out. Worlds that had long accepted the Tribunal's authority without question now began to challenge it. It took years, but finally, change came. The Galactic Tribunal was dissolved, replaced by a new system of justice that emphasized rehabilitation over punishment. Erebus and other deathworlds were officially closed, their remaining exiles rescued and offered new lives. On New Horizon, Zara watched these changes unfold with a sense of pride and wonder. The community she had become a part of had grown, welcoming new members from across the galaxy. Beings drawn by the promise of a society built on mutual respect and shared survival. As she stood on a hilltop, watching the twin suns set on another day, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had been sent to Erebus as punishment, expected to die alone and forgotten. Instead, she had found a family, a purpose, and a chance to change the galaxy for the better. A familiar shimmer announced San's arrival. "The first graduation ceremony at the New Horizon Academy is tomorrow," it said. "The students are hoping you'll speak." Zara smiled. The academy had been her idea, a place where the knowledge and skills of the Forgotten could be passed on, where the lessons of Erebus could be taught to a new generation. "I'd be honored," she replied. As night fell on New Horizon, Zara Chen, once an exile, now a leader, teacher and symbol of hope, looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Erebus still orbited its angry red sun, but it was no longer a place of death and despair. Instead, it had become a reminder of what was possible when beings from across the galaxy came together, united by compassion and a shared will to survive. The Tribunal had sentenced Zara to death on a forgotten world. Instead, she had found life, purpose, and a way to forge a better future for the entire galaxy. As the first stars began to twinkle in the lavender sky of New Horizon, Zara smiled. The greatest adventure, she realized, was only just beginning.